This podfic contains content that may be disturbing for some viewers, including mentions of violence, guns, and physical and emotional abuse. Please check out the complete list of content warnings in the description, and proceed with caution if you are sensitive to these topics.
Hello my lovely little gemstones, it's Afira, and today I'll be reading When the Chips Are Down by Whiskey with Patron. Chapter 24. I accidentally adopt a depressed lesbian. Normally, Janus was not a morning person, but Logan's presence certainly made it better. A hand shook Janus's shoulder. Wake up, sunshine. Janus opened one eye. Logan stood over the bed, one hand on Janus's shoulder and a smile on his face. Janus took Logan's hand and pressed a kiss to his knuckles. Why don't you ever sleep in with me? Janus mumbled. I like morning cuddles. I just needed some downtime before things got chaotic. He straightened. I'm going to come to work with you to help you deal with the hostage situation. Janus was suddenly wide awake. He'd forgotten about that. He sat up in bed, still holding Logan's hand. Right, I suppose I should get dressed then. Of course, you wouldn't want to go to work in your pajamas. Janus stood and walked to the closet to grab one of his suits as Logan made the bed. Janus often didn't bother, since he would just be going right back into bed at the end of the day anyway, but Logan insisted they'd try to keep their room as neat as possible. When Logan wasn't around, it was a mess. Janus grabbed one of his clip-on ties off the dresser. He hated to admit that he didn't actually know how to tie a tie. Bow ties were easy, but neckties were something else. Logan grabbed his shoulder and turned him around to face Logan. Logan plucked the clip-on from Janus's hand and set it back down on the dresser. He wrapped an actual necktie around Janus's neck. A black one, thank God. Any of Logan's usual blue striped ties would have clashed with Janus's yellow dress shirt. Logan finished tying the knot of the tie. A grin blossomed on his face. He wrapped the tie around his hand and tugged Janus down to plant a kiss on his lips. Janus smiled. You've been romantic lately, he muttered against Logan's lips. I'm blaming it on the gunshot wound. Logan pecked Janus on the cheek and let go of his tie. Do you often bring stim toys to work? No. Why? Bring one today. Things may get stressful, and you don't want to have another shutdown. Logan walked to the nightstand on his side of the bed and grabbed something off its surface. He tossed it to Janus. Janus fumbled with it and almost dropped it. You know I'm not good at catching things. He looked down at what Logan had thrown him. It was a necklace, the pendant made up of 3 interlocking rings. When did you get this? Janus asked, a little surprised. I ordered it online a while ago. I meant to give it to you earlier, but then I got shot and forgot about it. Janus blinked. Thank you, he said finally. You really didn't have to, but I wanted to. Logan kissed Janus on the cheek one last time before turning to the door. I'll head downstairs and start on breakfast. Can you wake up the kids? Janus reached back to latch the necklace behind his neck. Sure. Logan left the bedroom. As soon as Janus managed to get the necklace on, he took a moment to admire it. It was likely just something that Logan had come across online and decided to buy as a spur-of-the-moment thing, but Janus appreciated it nonetheless. He rolled the 3 interlocking rings between his fingers. Logan didn't need to get him anything, but he did anyways. He grabbed his gloves off the dresser and slipped them on. He made his way to the door. He didn't know if any of the kids would already be awake, but he was willing to bet that they weren't. Not at 8 in the morning. He walked down the hall towards the living room. He approached Virgil's door first. The twins might be a bit hyperactive, and Janus wasn't sure he could deal with that right this minute. He grabbed the doorknob and slowly pushed the door open. He poked his head in the room, and his heart nearly melted. Virgil and his 2 brothers were curled up on the bed in a tangle of blankets. All 3 were asleep. Remus was sprawled across most of the bed, lightly snoring. Virgil held Roman in his arms, and the 2 of them were wrapped up in most of the blankets. Virgil had Remus's arm grasped in one hand, as if trying to make sure that he didn't disappear in his sleep. Janus didn't want to interrupt such a peaceful scene. However, he needed to wake the kids so he could take them to work. He stepped forward and reached out to nudge Virgil's shoulder. Virgil, he said quietly, wake up. Virgil bolted upright. Janus yelped and skittered back. Virgil stared at Janus, eyes wide as saucers, arms crossed in front of him as if ready to block a punch. Roman and Remus stirred from the movement. Virgil slowly lowered his arms. Oh, Mr. Chimera. He swallowed and looked down. Sorry. No need to apologize, Virgil, Janus assured him, although his heart was still pounding from the initial shock. I was just coming in to wake you up. Are you all right? Virgil nodded. Janus, he said quietly, rubbing his eyes. Yes, Virgil. Do you have any dimmer light bulbs I could use? This one's too bright. He gestured up to the light in the ceiling. Yes, I have quite a few. They're all yellow lights, though. Are you okay with that? Virgil just nodded again. He reached out and nudged Roman. "Wake up, kiddos." Janus turned and left the room. He didn't know why Virgil had been so startled, but he couldn't help but feel like he'd done something wrong. He hadn't meant to scare Virgil. Downstairs, things were quiet. Logan was in the kitchen, and DW was already dressed and sipping at a cup of coffee in the dining room. She looked up as Janus walked in, and her gaze fell on the necklace resting over his tie. "Where'd you get that?" "Logan gave it to me." Janus fiddled with the rings and took a seat next to her. "Are you ready to deal with this situation?" DW sighed. "Yeah, you're gonna be doing the talking, though. Can you handle that?" "I hope so." Breakfast was quiet as well. Roman and Remus accepted a slice of toast each from Logan. Virgil declined the toast and grabbed a couple of strawberry Pop-Tarts instead, once he finally came downstairs. He decided to eat in the kitchen, and his brother stayed with him. Janus made a mental note to buy some more Pop-Tarts if Virgil was going to keep eating them. When it came time to leave, Janus was sure he'd never been more nervous to go to work. Since there weren't enough seats in one car for all of them, Logan got his car out of the garage and offered to drive the kids. DW and Janus got in their own car. They pulled out of the driveway and drove after Logan. Janus glanced at DW, who was in the driver's seat. "Nervous?" he asked. "Can you tell?" "Oh, absolutely not, Dorothy. Your shaking hands make you the picture of confidence." DW snorted. "Yeah." Her face fell. "I'm just thinking of the hostage, what her family might be feeling. Like, how would I feel if it had been you who was shot? Or Teal, or Maggie?" Janus nodded in understanding. Truthfully, that thought had crossed his mind as well. He couldn't help but wonder how he would feel if he was in that situation. He rolled the rings of his necklace between his fingers as DW drove through the streets. He hoped he would be prepared for this. They parked in the lot behind the bank. Janus' stomach turned with anxiety as he and DW followed Logan and the kids into the building. DW gripped his hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. He squeezed back. The elevator ride down to the first floor was stressful. He tried to take some deep breaths to calm himself down. Maggie and Teal were both waiting for them as soon as they stepped out of the elevator. "Guys," Maggie said, "I hate to bother you, but there's another problem." Janus resisted the growing urge to scream. "It will have to wait until after we deal with the hostage situation." DW nudged her way to the front of the group. "I'll deal with it. Jan, you take Logan and the kids to deal with the hostage stuff." Maggie breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Janus. Miss Short is already waiting in your office for you." She started down the hallway. Teal smirked at Logan and playfully swatted his arm before she walked off. Logan tried to swat her back, but she was already too far away. He rolled his eyes and watched as his sister followed after DW and Maggie. Logan turned to Janus and put a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay, Janus?" Janus nodded. "I'm fine. Let's go." They walked down the hall side by side, the 3 Hart children right behind them. Janus wasn't sure if he wanted them in the room while he was trying to fix this specific situation, but someone needed to keep an eye on them. The door to DW's office was already open, and across the room, the door to Janus's office was open as well. He steeled his nerves and strode across DW's office. Logan and the kids followed. He caught sight of the woman sitting in front of his desk and stopped dead in his tracks. He thought, for one heart-stopping moment, that Patton Hart was there, sobbing his eyes out. The moment passed, but his adrenaline didn't seem to get the memo, even as he examined the woman's face and decided that no, she was not, in fact, Patton Hart in a pale blue dress. A gray cardigan was tied around her shoulders. Her light brown hair fell just past her chin in a cute bob. When she turned to look at Janus, her eyes were bloodshot through her round glasses. A smattering of freckles dotted her cheeks. Still, Diana Short looked too much like him to be a coincidence. "Miss Short," Janus said in greeting. Janus sat down in his chair across from her. Logan stood at his side. It was odd to see her in person. When she was borrowing money from him, he only saw her as an email address, some random woman behind a screen who bit off more than she could chew and ended up in a bad situation. He never put a face to a name with one of his clients before. Diana Short wiped at her eyes under her glasses. "Mr. Chimera," she said. Her voice cracked with emotion. Her gaze fell on Virgil and the twins. Her eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" Virgil stared at her in shock. "Diana? You know her?" Janus asked, curious, although this didn't surprise him. "She's our cousin." Virgil and his brothers rushed toward her. "Why are you here?" Diana stood and enveloped all 3 of them in a hug. "Something happened," she said softly. "Don't worry about it. Where's Uncle Pat?" "Running from someone," Remus answered. "We don't know why." "We're staying with Mr. Chimera," Roman piped up. Janus furrowed his brow. She was Patton Hart's niece. How young did that make her? Miss Short, he said, just how old are you? Diana didn't answer right away. 18. Why on earth were you borrowing money from a crime organization? Logan asked, baffled. Diana let go of the three brothers with one arm to wipe at her eyes. I didn't have a lot of choice if I wanted to go to college. My parents sent me on my own. Gemma and my uncle were my only sources of money. Logan blinked. Gemma? Her girlfriend, Janus clarified. The one that we took hostage. Logan grimaced. Ah. Diana let go of the three boys and stepped back. She sat back down in her chair, her three cousins standing around her as if they didn't know whether to stay there or go sit down on the couch. I was wondering where Patton went, Diana said. I stopped by your house, but no one was home. You stopped by the Hart's house? Janus asked. A pang of concern went through him. By any chance, have you been followed? I don't know, Diana said. Maybe. I thought I was for a bit, but I thought I was just being paranoid. Janus exchanged a knowing glance with Logan. If she had stopped by Patton's house, anyone in Rathsblade might have made the connection between her and Patton. They could be considering kidnapping her in order to get to Patton. The minute she left this building, she could be in danger. Diana shook her head and took a deep breath. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about Patton. I still need to finish my business with you. She looked at Janus. Right. Janus couldn't stop playing with the necklace Logan gave him. I take it that someone already took you to our infirmary yesterday to confirm that the woman who was hurt was your girlfriend? Janus asked. Diana nodded. She sniffled, eyes trained on the surface of the desk. I'm sorry I yelled at you when you called yesterday, she choked out. I don't know why I blew up. It's all right, Miss Short, Janus assured her. I don't blame you. I would have done the same. He cleared his throat and sat up straight. He was finding it very difficult to remain calm and professional. He just felt so absolutely awful about what happened. So, as for the money you owe, we will not be asking you to repay it. I will be paying for any medical procedures, and if there is anything else you need financial help for, I will be glad to assist. Diana wiped her eyes again. Anything I need help with? Anything at all? Yes. Janus twisted the chain of his necklace. What is it that you need? I need a place to stay. Janus blinked. He hadn't been expecting that. I can certainly provide that, but why? Do you not have a home? Gemma and I just moved into the dorms at college before you kidnapped her. I can't continue school anymore. Not like this. Janus felt a bullet of guilt tear through him when she said that. They probably won't let me stay in the dorms if I'm not taking classes, so I need somewhere to stay. And I'm not going back to my parents. They would kill me if they knew I was here. That can absolutely be arranged, Janus said. You can choose wherever you want to stay, and I will... Janus paused and looked at Virgil. Virgil stared at him with what Janus could only describe as puppy dog eyes. Can she stay with us? Virgil asked. He batted his eyelashes for good measure. Roman and Remus joined in, gazing at Janus with wide, pleading eyes. Looking into their hopeful gazes, Janus found it immensely difficult to say no. Well, he said, trying to find a way to decline without feeling bad. I'm sure that if she can't find another... He shot a glance at Remus and sighed in defeat. I'm already taking care of 3 kids. What's one more? The 3 boys' faces all lit up at once. Janus turned to Diana. Miss Short, would that arrangement be all right with you? Roman turned his gaze to Diana and clasped his hands together. Please? Diana hesitated. I don't know. Logan straightened his glasses. If it's any consolation, you won't be the only girl in the house. I'm sure DW would actually be quite thrilled to have some female company. It also might be the safest option for you, as the people who were chasing after your uncle may come after you as well if they know you're related. Diana bit her lip nervously. I guess. Just for now. All right, Janus sighed, relieved that this issue was more or less resolved. You can stay here in my office until it's time to go home. Roman grabbed Diana's hand and pulled her out of the chair, earning a startled yelp from her. Come see our pillow fort! Roman and Remus dragged her off to the pillow fort. Virgil started after them, but he paused. He turned to look at Janus. Janus, he said quietly. Yes, Virgil. Am I the reason Diana's here? Janus blinked. I don't know what you mean. Virgil shoved his hands in his pockets. Her girlfriend got hurt because of me. Yesterday. If I hadn't gone down there, she wouldn't have gotten shot. Before Janus could say anything, Logan stepped forward and put a reassuring hand on Virgil's shoulder. You were not the one with the gun, Virgil. Anyone could have gotten hurt yesterday, whether you were there or not. It's not your fault. Virgil nodded, but he didn't look quite convinced. He gnawed on his bat necklace and crawled into the pillow fort after his brothers. Janus stared after Virgil with concern. The kid must have felt incredibly guilty over what happened yesterday. Janus wanted to make sure he was okay, but he didn't know what to say or do about it. He got the feeling Virgil wasn't going to let this issue go. Janus picked up the phone. Maybe he should make a call to someone who could help with these kids. Remy woke to a pounding headache. He groaned and burrowed further into the bed. Something was wrapped in his arms, and he hugged it tighter. He relaxed when he felt a hand run through his hair. It's okay, Rem, a familiar voice said from above him. You can go back to sleep. We're not leaving right away. Remy furrowed his brow. Didn't he need to be awake right now? Something had happened. He needed to fix it. He just couldn't remember what it was. You don't need to fix anything, the voice said. The hand still stroked his hair, trying to lull him back to sleep. It was working. You just need rest. But Remy got in trouble, didn't he? He needed to apologize or fix it or something. He couldn't just lay here. No, the voice whispered. You don't have to apologize for anything. You need to stay here and rest. Remy grunted and squirmed. Then he noticed that whatever he was resting his head on was more solid than a pillow, but just as comfortable. It was warm and soft. He nuzzled into it with a content sigh. He realized with a start that the thing he was cuddling in his arms was a person's torso, and if he was cuddling someone, then the thing he was resting his head on was... His eyes snapped open and he looked up, but the sudden movement made his head spin and spots dance in his vision. He groaned in pain and shook his head. He put his hands on the mattress and pushed himself up, staring down at the other person in the bed. Patton lay there in his pajamas. The hand that had been in Remy's hair now rested on his shoulder. Remy's hands were on either side of Patton, accidentally trapping him on the bed right under Remy, which, oddly enough, made his face heat up. Maybe it was just hot under the covers. Yeah, that was it. Patton raised an eyebrow. You feeling okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Remy swallowed and stared down at Patton. Were his eyes always that pretty? Remy cleared his throat and rolled off of Patton. Sorry, I'm just still tired. He racked his brain, trying to remember how he'd ended up here, but he just drew a blank. Everything after checking into the hotel was fuzzy. What happened? You were drugged and kidnapped, Patton said. He reached over and tangled his fingers back in Remy's hair. Thomas and I got you out of there. You did most of it, said another voice in the room. Remy jumped. He hadn't realized there were other people around. Thomas sat on the other bed in his red jacket, tying his shoes. Andy and Price were there too. Their hair was wet, as if they'd just showered. Andy rubbed at her hair with a towel, and Price carefully combed her own while staring into a compact mirror. Patton shrugged. Well, I didn't do much. He turned back to Remy. You want to get some more rest, Rem? Price rolled her eyes and snapped her mirror shut. Oh my God. Are you two going to stop being gay for 2 seconds? No one seemed to notice the blush on Remy's face as Thomas turned to glare at Price. Was that an insult at gay people? Oh, honey, no. I'm a raging bisexual. Price ran a hand through her hair. I look like a lesbian, though. She looked at Andy. Do you not have any feminine clothes? Well, I'm sorry I'm more butch than you want for your fashion taste, Andy scoffed. You're lucky I have shirts small enough to fit you. Price sighed. Whatever. Thanks for the shirt, I guess. She straightened her jacket. Anyways, sunglasses. Now that you're awake, Hot Topic has something to ask you. Andy narrowed her eyes. Why are you asking me to ask him? You're his friend. Fine. Andy tossed her towel to the floor and grabbed her laptop bag. Price and I were wondering if we could borrow your bike. I need to check something out, and I don't want to leave you guys without Thomas's car in case you need to run. Thomas furrowed his brow. Where are you going? Just doing a side job, Andy said. There was something in her voice, some sort of hesitation, but Remy couldn't decipher it. His head was still spinning. Remy nodded. Sure, don't crash it or anything. Cool. Andy leaned down and dug through the pockets of Remy's leather jacket for the keys. We're gonna grab something to eat in the dining area. Remy, you want us to bring you some breakfast? We'll get room service, Patton answered for him. Remy was glad he did. He didn't know if he could stand up without passing out. Thomas stood. I'll be right back after breakfast. Stay safe. With that, he, Price, and Andy all filed out of the hotel room. That left Remy and Patton alone. Patton ruffled Remy's hair. I'll get us some food. Stay here. He sat up and grabbed the phone off the bedside table, along with his glasses. Remy snuggled under the covers again, deciding that getting some more sleep wouldn't be the worst thing for him right now. Besides, Patton would protect him if anything went wrong. Nothing bad could happen as long as Patton was around. Chapter 25. Girls' Day doesn't go as planned. DW straightened her blazer as she followed Maggie and Teal down the hall. So, what's the issue? Still kind of figuring it out, Maggie admitted. Her heeled boots clacked against the floor. Long story short, Teal said, a bounty hunter from the next city over came here demanding to speak with Mr. Chimera. He said he had something important to tell us, but he wouldn't disclose what it was. He was acting nervous, like he was being followed. DW let that sink in. Why on earth would a random bounty hunter from Side Hill come here? Chimera didn't have any bounty hunters employed, and neither did Wrath, so this one was probably unaffiliated or involved in another organization. Where did you put him? DW asked. We've got him in my office, Teal said. She straightened her blue necktie. We haven't gotten anything out of him yet. He's refusing to say anything until he sees Mr. Chimera, but I'm sure you can get him to talk. He demanded that we put guards outside the door, for whatever reason. We weren't going to leave him alone in there anyways, but it was strange that he requested it. DW wondered what to do as they walked towards Teal's office. They never really had a situation like this before. Bounty hunters didn't often come banging on their door. The three of them paused in front of Teal's office. The door was open. 2 other agents flanked it, and inside, DW spotted a man sitting in the chair in front of Teal's desk. A few other agents were inside, keeping watch over the bounty hunter to make sure he didn't run off or attack anyone. They wouldn't let just anyone into the building without a bunch of security. DW strode into the room, hands behind her back. So, mind telling me exactly who you are and why you thought you could get an audience with Chimera as soon as you drop by? The bounty hunter whirled around in his seat to face DW. He had obviously been expecting Janus, because his face screwed into a scowl. Who the hell are you? DW barked out a laugh and walked around the other agents to have a seat at Teal's desk, right across from the bounty hunter. She sat down and crossed her real leg over her prosthetic, leaning back in the chair as if this was her office, not someone else's. I don't have to answer to you. She examined her nails. Now, why don't you tell me who you are, so we can get this over with? I want to speak to the head of Chimera, the bounty hunter snarled. The agents on either side of him tensed, ready to grab him and escort him from the room. DW motioned for them to relax. Maggie and Teal walked over to stand at DW's sides. DW uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, glaring at the bounty hunter across the desk. I guess Chimera isn't a very apt name for us. We're more of a hydra. In case you haven't noticed, there's more than one head. Janus is just the one in the middle, the one everyone sees first. You don't know how many heads there are. I'm the one you're dealing with now. She spread her hands. But I understand why you would prefer Janus. He's the one with the least chance of killing you if you don't tell me why you're here. The bounty hunter paled. Your little monologue doesn't scare me, he said in a shaky voice. DW smirked at that. Get on with it then, DW said. Who are you, and what are you doing here? I'm here with information that I think you might want. I'll need a name first. The bounty hunter sighed. My name is James Thompson. I'm an unaffiliated bounty hunter, and I swear on my life that I'm not here to harm anyone. DW's smirk spread into a smile at the wording he'd used. We'll hold you to that swear. Now, what information do you think is so absolutely important that you feel you have to share it with us? James took a deep breath. I promised I wouldn't say, so if I go missing or something after this, I'm blaming it on you. DW went back to examining her fingernails. God, this was fun. She didn't often deal with big things personally. She should let Janus know she could deal with these problems more. It would probably take a workload off his shoulders as well, and allow him to deal with the smaller problems that he liked handling more. Poison Dart is alive. Those words hit her like a bullet. She froze. No, how did that information get out? How did this random bounty hunter know? DW slowly looked up at everyone else in the room. Some of the younger agents looked confused, but the older ones exchanged nervous glances with each other. DW put her hands on the desk and stood. I want everyone out of the room, except for you 3. She gestured at James, Teal, and Maggie. The agents looked confused and concerned, but they all filed out of the room, leaving the 4 of them alone. DW sat back and folded her hands on the desk. She took a deep breath to keep calm. Why do you think that? I saw him! James shouted. Maggie stepped forward, eyes narrowed. Teal placed a hand on her shoulder to keep him back. You think you saw him, DW corrected. No, I know I did. James took a deep breath. Okay, here's the full story. I was going after someone so I could get them for the bounty. Just a standard job. Everything was going fine. I kidnapped the person's friend to get to them. Normal stuff. DW nodded as James spoke. Her guts sank. She didn't need to know who James had been after. DW already knew. I did the standard thing, James continued. I called the guy I wanted and told him to give himself up for his friend. Me and my partner, Darren, were holding him in a hotel room. The guy came in, gave himself up, we let his friend go, and we were going to take him outside when all of a sudden he waved his hand, attacked us. He moved so goddamn fast we hardly had time to do anything. He stabbed Darren and almost shot me. Darren's in the hospital now. The guy said not to come after him, and I asked how he would stop us if we did, and he said he was poison dart. And before you say it was probably just an imposter, you didn't see the fucker. If you saw it, you would believe it too. DW sighed. She couldn't let this random bounty hunter know that he was right about poison dart being alive. There was silence for a moment. Are you done? DW asked. Yes. And this happened over in Side Hill? Yes. And who is this person you insist is actually poison dart? James didn't answer right away. He glanced back at the door, as if poison dart himself would kick it down and shoot him in the head for speaking. That could have happened 10 years ago, but now, not a chance. James leaned in to whisper, Patton Hart. DW's heart sank, but she tried to keep her face emotionless. Really? That's the best you could come up with? It's true! James burst. I saw him! He came in, he stabbed Darren, and said he was poison dart. He's still in the hotel we kidnapped his friend in. Moggy stepped forward, glaring at James, a silent warning to calm down. James withered under her glare. DW tapped her fingers on the desk. She wasn't great at outright lying, so it was time to stretch some truths. I know Patton Hart, she said, starting off with something true to ease herself into a lie. He just happened to get in shit with Rathsblade and went on the run. I also know who Poison Dart used to be. Also a truth. Patton Hart is nothing like Poison Dart. They are not the same people. That was mostly true. DW didn't consider them to be the same people. As far as DW was concerned, Poison Dart died in 2010, and Patton Hart had been living as himself ever since. She still didn't quite trust the man, or even like him all that much, but he was nowhere near as bad as he was in 2010 and the years before. But he told me a lie in order to get you to leave him alone, most likely. DW finished. She was getting dangerously close to lying territory now. She hoped she doesn't start fumbling with her words. Why would he use Poison Dart's name to cover his ass if he wasn't actually Poison Dart? James looked absolutely flabbergasted that DW was disproving his theory. DW just had to keep him from finding out that it was the truth. He must have thought you were stupid enough to believe it. DW leaned back in the chair with a sigh. We're done here. Maria, Alex, she called. The door to Teal's office swung open and 2 agents stepped in. Escort this bounty hunter out of the building, please. He has nothing useful to tell us. But it's true, James half-heartedly muttered as he was lifted out of his chair. He said he was. He didn't struggle as he was dragged out of the room. A few other agents stepped in once he was gone, fearful looks in their eyes. Is it true? One of them asked. No, DW said immediately. He was just stupid enough to believe a lie. DW waved a hand. You can all go. I need to discuss things with Moggy and Teal. And don't let this little incident get out to anyone. We don't need rumors bouncing around. The agents left, not looking entirely convinced. They shut the door behind them. Could you tell I was lying out of my ass? DW said. Yes, Moggy said. At the same time, Teal said no. They both looked at each other in confusion. Moggy bounced on her heels. Well, I think you could have done better, but you didn't fumble your words. He at least believed that you believed you were telling the truth. That's what I was thinking, Teal said, pushing her glasses up her nose. I was looking at it objectively, from the perspective of someone who doesn't know your tells. But you do know my tells, DW pointed out. And from that perspective, that one lie at the end was glaringly obvious, Teal said. You did your best. I do have some questions, though, Moggy said. She sat on Teal's desk and smoothed out her skirt. Why did he say Patton Hart was Poison Dart? Isn't he the guy whose kids you're taking care of? DW sighed. She couldn't just lie to Teal and Moggy. It was impossible, not to mention it would make her feel bad. Yeah, he is. But I'm sure he was just using the name Poison Dart to get that bounty hunter off his back. Nope. Teal pointed down at DW's hip. You're rubbing your prosthetic leg. You do that when you're lying. DW moved both her hands so they were on top of the desk, frustrated that Teal knew her so well. Look, I just don't think we should talk about it. It's kind of a secret between the heads of Chimera in this area. So, Poison Dart is alive? Moggy whispered. And he's Patton Hart, Teal added. DW stood. I can't confirm or deny anything. I'm not really supposed to say. This is between me, Janus, and Emil. It's a complicated story. I might actually have to talk to Emil about it. You can use my phone, Teal said, gesturing to the phone on her desk. Do you need us to leave the room? No point, DW sighed. You pretty much already know, even though I feel like I shouldn't outright say it. Sounds good to me. Moggy shifted in her seat on Teal's desk, disturbing some of the papers on the desktop. As Teal tried to calmly coax Moggy off the desk before she ruined all of Teal's important documents, DW punched in Emil's number. She hoped they could do some damage control before rumors of Poison Dart began to spread. Andy was glad that she and Price had taken Remy's bike instead of asking to borrow Thomas's car. For one, it was faster, and if anyone came after them, which was unlikely, but still, it wouldn't be too hard to get away. Also, her legs were too short to comfortably drive Thomas's car. She'd tried before. Andy drove the bike through the city. Price pointed her down certain streets, leading them to the former headquarters of the Glassed Hearts gang. Andy still didn't trust Price, and was half sure she was actually leading them somewhere dangerous, but Andy tried not to think about that for now. She just needed to focus on getting them through the city safely. Although, there was no reason to think they wouldn't be safe. They weren't traveling with Patton. No bounty hunters would be after them. They were in neutral territory. Still, she couldn't help but glance over her shoulder every once in a while. Traveling with Patton yesterday really set her on edge. As they drove on, the buildings became more and more ruined. They mostly appeared to be abandoned or repurposed warehouses and apartment buildings. Some were falling apart at the seams. Others were more well taken care of. Andy had never been to this area of Side Hill before. Granted, she hardly ever actually went outside. She was usually too busy working to go anywhere. Price pointed down another street, and Andy turned the bike to follow her directions. Price pointed to a tall building. Andy slowed to park in front of it. The two of them pried off their helmets. Oh no, my hair is all messed up, Price whined. Andy glanced back to look. Price's hair looked absolutely perfect, aside from a little cowlick in the back. You're fine, Princey. Andy set her helmet on the bike seat and gazed up at the building. So, this is the one Poison Dart set on fire? The building looked like it had used to be an apartment building, but now it was merely a shell of what it once was. The corner of the building near the top was nothing but rubble. The tops of the walls were black and jagged, as if the entire top floor of the building had been ripped off. Most of the windows either didn't have any glass panes in them or were cracked. I don't think anyone's bought it, Price said. Pretty sure this is still Glassed Heart's property, but they haven't been here in ages. Interesting. Andy shouldered her laptop bag. Price had told her to leave it behind, but Andy's laptop was pretty much a part of her. She wouldn't leave it behind even if her house was on fire. Here goes nothing. Andy started for the building, but she yelped when Price grabbed the back of her sweater and yanked her to a stop. Hold up, Hot Topic, Price exclaimed. You can't just walk in there like you own the place. I've been chased down by gangs for doing less. Andy resisted the urge to scream. Princey, you said they haven't been here in ages. Why are we here if we're not going to check it out? I'm just saying we should be careful, Price said. She reached into her jacket and grabbed a gun. Let me go first. I don't want you getting shot. Andy blinked, a little taken aback. You're going first to keep me safe? I thought you didn't give a shit about me. Price swallowed. Well, your sense of humor can be endearing at times. Besides, you're the only other woman in the group I'm stuck with. I will not be dragged around with a bunch of men on my own. With that, she turned and strode into the building, leaving Andy in her mild confusion. Andy shook it off and followed Price to the building. Price turned the doorknob and gently pushed it open. She poked her head into the building, and Andy found herself rolling her eyes at Price's unnecessary precautions. Price stepped inside, motioning for Andy to follow. Broken glass crunched up beneath Andy's Converse as they entered the building. As bad as it looked on the outside, the inside was worse. Old debris was scattered all around the room. The wall on the opposite end of the room was mostly destroyed, and the floor above was partially collapsed, scattering rubble everywhere. Black scorch marks decorated the walls. So, you said what happened here was like an old horror story, Andy said. Mind telling it to me? Price's face brightened at the request. Tell you a story? Oh, girl, you don't want me to. I won't shut up for at least an hour. Just tell me a quick version, Andy said. Please, I don't want to be here for longer than necessary. This place gives me the creeps. Price cleared her throat. Okay, so, just from what I've heard through the grapevine, mostly through older members of the Glassed Hearts, they were pretty powerful. They usually deal in drugs and intimidation gigs. They were badass as hell when they set up base here. They used to be a lot bigger and more powerful back then. Price grinned as she spoke. She sounded excited. They ran this entire end of Side Hill. They protected their little part of the community from bigger gangs. They were incredible, strong, capable people who didn't rely on any bigger organization to keep them going. I was honestly tempted to see if I could join them when I was younger. So what went wrong? Andy said. Well, Price said. Her voice took on a harder, almost angry tone. One day, they were fine. The next, this entire building went up in flames. She turned her gaze to the broken windows. The fire started on the bottom floor. Hardly anyone made it out. It was a wonder any of the members of the gang survived. None of the gang members returned to this place for fear that someone could try and finish them off. Everyone who lived ran for their lives. They had to rebuild everything back from the ground up when they moved to Clawmore. Andy gazed around the destroyed building. She found it so hard to believe that Patton Hart would do such a thing. But how did the fire start? Price shrugged. No one knows. Some of them thought it was an inside job, but no surviving members fessed up, so they ruled that out. They only realized it could have been an assassin named Poison Dart when two of the remaining members went to hide out in the Critic House and realized they were being followed. The guy staked them out for days until one of them snuck off the property for whatever reason. She was found dead at the edge of the property, facing the hotel as if she'd tried to run back to it but got shot in the back just before she stepped foot in the parking lot. Andy furrowed her brow. But that makes no sense. If the assassin tracked them to the Critic House, why didn't he shoot her in the back as soon as she stepped off the property? Bounty hunters and assassins think differently, Price said. Part of it is that Poison Dart was probably trying to stay out of sight, so she thought it was safe to leave. If she saw him, she wouldn't have left and he couldn't get her. The rest of the reason, well, it's a bit of a mind game. Intimidation's what all of us do in order to get information, keep safe, or even just pull off a job in a new way so we don't get bored doing the same thing over and over. He must have tracked her to wherever she was going, made sure she suspected she was being followed to put her on edge, then shot her just as she thought she'd be safe. Andy knew what it was like to be followed. However, she couldn't imagine how it would feel to leave a safe haven and be paranoid about being followed until she returned, only to be shot in the back when she thought she was safe. Just the thought made Andy shudder. She gazed around the ruined building. So, do you think we'll be able to find anything useful here that'll tell us anything about Poison Dart? Maybe. Price started for the far wall. Let's get looking. Andy gripped the strap of her laptop bag tight as she shuffled through the debris. She wasn't sure if there was anything useful here, and she didn't know why she thought there would be. The entire place was burnt. There was probably nothing left. The most they could hope for was ruined remnants from the lives of the gang members that used to live here. They might find something related to Poison Dart, but it probably wouldn't explain how it was related to Patton. However, Andy didn't regret coming here. It helped her understand just a little better how dangerous this business was. She'd been in it for a few years already, but she worked behind the scenes, protected behind a screen. Seeing this destruction was terrifying. This is what people did in her line of work. Even if most people didn't go to these lengths to eliminate their targets, some people certainly had the capacity. Andy just had no idea why Patton Hart, of all people, would go that far. She kicked over an old chunk of the ceiling. Probably dozens of people had died here. It was strange to stand here knowing that. She took a deep breath and kicked some more debris aside. She doubted they would find anything useful or helpful, but there was no harm in looking. She put her hands on a particularly large piece of rubble and pushed. It grated against the ground, forcing other pieces of the walls and ceiling out of the way. It didn't reveal much of anything, aside from more debris, so she moved on. Andy heard Price rummaging around in the rubble in the next room over. Neither of them had found anything interesting yet, or if Price did, she didn't announce it. Andy was pushing aside a small chunk of the ceiling when she heard the sound of something metal scraping against the floor. She stopped moving the chunk and the sound stopped. Out of curiosity, she took her hands off of it and peered around the side of it. Sitting on the floor, poking out from underneath the chunk of ceiling, was a key. Andy lifted the chunk and set it aside to look. The key was attached to a keychain in the shape of a colorful little frog, the colors muted by ash and dust. On the keychain next to the key was a metal tag that had a logo of a fairy on it. Andy picked it up and turned it over in her fingers. "Hey, Price?" she shouted. She heard frantic scuffling from the room over. Price poked her head through the hole in the wall. "What is it?" she asked eagerly. "I found something." Andy walked over to her. "Not sure if it's important, but it's something." Price clambered over the remaining bit of the wall to join Andy in the entrance room. She dusted off her spotless white jacket. Andy approached with the keychain and held it out. Price took it and examined it. She stopped when she saw the tag. "Oh, I know this logo. It's from Fairy Godmother's antique shop. It doubles as a weapon shop and storage unit. I've got a locker there. Someone must have lost the key to their locker. Andy stared at the little frog on the keychain. I think I know who. Price's face lit up. Really? Who? Andy pointed at the frog. That's a poison dart frog. Price's eyes widened in realization. Oh. She turned the tag over and felt along it with her thumb. They always engrave the locker numbers on the back. If we go there, we could get into his locker. She paused. There are initials engraved on it below the number. PJ. Those aren't his initials, but do you think that's Deadshot? Why do you keep calling him that? Andy asked. I like nicknames. Price shoved the keychain in her pocket. I think we should keep looking, Hot Topic. Andy wanted nothing more than to drive straight over to this antique shop and weapons unit, but Remy and the others would probably be expecting them to get back soon. They're gonna get worried, Andy said. Price waved a hand. Oh, whatever. Just text Tomothy and let him know we're still busy. Tomothy? My other options were Thomas the Dank Engine and Tommy Salami, but sometimes less is more, you know? Andy pulled out her phone. I'm changing his contact name to Thomas the Dank Engine. After quickly changing Thomas's contact in her phone, Andy went to her messages and shot him a text. We're still busy. We'll be a few minutes or hours yet. Don't burn down the hotel while we're gone. Andy shoved her phone back into her pocket without waiting for a response. All right, let's go see what we can learn about Patton. Chapter 26. Come get your free mental breakdown. It's on the house. Virgil flapped his sweater sleeves as Roman and Remus chatted back and forth within their pillow fort. In all honesty, he wasn't listening to most of what they were saying, choosing instead to tune out their voices in favor of getting lost in his thoughts. Diana, however, nodded along politely as they spoke. She always listened to them when she visited, which Virgil appreciated. Dad listened to them too, of course, but it was nice to have someone closer to their age to talk to. Virgil always loved it when Diana visited. Her parents never came to the house, but she drove to see Virgil and his family by herself often. However, her presence was a painful reminder of the events that had happened just the day before. Virgil couldn't shake the guilt that stuck to him like glue. Mr. Minder might have said otherwise, but there was no denying that it was his own fault that Diana's girlfriend had gotten hurt. If he hadn't gone downstairs, nothing bad would have happened. You think we can ask Mr. Chimera to take us to a toy store? Remus perked up. We haven't gone to one in months. Diana nodded. I'm sure he will if you ask, she said. Her voice was quiet. You can come with us, Roman offered. If you're staying with us, you have to stay in Mr. Chimera's sight. That's what Dad said, apparently. He's supposed to protect us. Oh, I don't want to intrude, Diana said, shaking her head. You guys should have fun. You're gonna want to get some toys too, Remus said. It'll be fun. Come on, we'll ask him later. Oh, I don't know. I still need to get my stuff from the college dorms. Maybe Mr. Minder could take you to get your stuff today, Virgil suggested. Made sense to him, and Diana would still be safe if Mr. Minder was with her. Diana gave him a smile. Maybe. Roman piped up with something else to talk about, and Virgil turned his attention to Janus's voice outside the pillow fort. He'd been talking for a while, and Virgil heard his footsteps pacing back and forth across the room as he spoke. She is a legal adult, yes, Janus said. I cannot force her to, but I believe she would benefit from seeing a grief counselor, or at least a therapist of some sort. Would that be a good idea, do you think? There was a pause as whoever Janus was speaking to on the phone responded. I think 2 of Patton's kids should see a therapist as well, he continued. And Roman might benefit just from 1 appointment at least. But the other 2... Well, yes, Logan has known these kids for a while now, and both he and their father are quite certain that there are some things they need to work through. I was told Virgil might have autism, but even before that I saw a lot of familiar symptoms in him. Another pause. Well, I don't know. I haven't asked them. I mean, I'm not diagnosed either, but I couldn't care less. These are kids. They might want to know exactly what's going on with themselves. Virgil pulled his attention away from Janus. What was this about a grief counselor? Oh, no. Oh, no. Was Diana's girlfriend dead? Guilt washed over Virgil like a bucket of ice-cold water. He had been downstairs when Gemma was shot. He witnessed someone he knew get seriously hurt. The hostage who had threatened to shoot him had shot Gemma instead. And if he had never gone there, the hostage would have never threatened to shoot her, and she would have never stepped in and gotten hurt. It was his fault someone was hurt. He was vaguely aware of his breathing picking up speed. He was responsible for someone getting shot. He caused Diana's distress. The room suddenly felt too hot in his sweater. He quickly squirmed out of it. He heard Roman and Remus asking him questions, trying to make sure he was okay, but the words were too loud to register anything. He had to get out of this stifling room. He needed to take a breath somewhere else. He scrambled out of the blanket fort, grimacing through Roman and Remus's loud shouts of protest. He hardly saw Mr. Chimera and Mr. Minder in the room, and walked straight for the door. He heard Janus's quieter voice say, "Talk later, Emile. There's a problem," before Virgil threw the door open and hurried out of the office. He picked up his pace and rushed across EW's office, bursting into the hallway. He just needed to be away from people. He hurried down the hall. Their gazes burned into him, as if they knew what he'd done, and the thought only made the guilt grow inside of him, threatening to spill over and drown him. He turned down another hallway, searching for a place with no people, no one to look at him with those accusatory glances. He needed to find somewhere to hide. His lungs burned, legs slowing as they grew tired. He stumbled over his feet. His legs felt like jelly. His back hit the wall and he slid down it, chest heaving. There didn't seem to be anyone in this hallway, fortunately. He didn't want anyone to find him and be mad at him, but he deserved it. He half wished Diana would come find him just to yell at him. That would drive him into a meltdown, sure, but he deserved to be yelled at. He deserved to suffer for what he did. Maybe Mr. Chimera and Mr. Minder would come find him and shout at him too. Virgil shook his head frantically, tears pricking at his eyes. He pulled his knees up to his chest and buried his face in his hands to shield his gaze from the lights in the hall. He hated this. He hated when he felt helpless like this, but he couldn't stop. He rocked back and forth, as much as he could with the wall to his back. Virgil didn't know how long it took for a pair of footsteps to make its way toward him. He heard a gentle thump as someone sat down next to him, not close enough to touch, but close enough that he knew they were there. He startled when he felt something drape over his shoulders. It didn't feel like his own sweater. It wasn't a suit jacket either, so this probably wasn't Mr. Chimera. Nor was it a cardigan, so this wasn't Diana. The slight weight of the sweater on his shoulders brought him out of his own mind a little. He lifted his head just enough to look over next to him. Remus sat cross-legged on the floor, hands folded in his lap. He was no longer wearing his hoodie, having set it over Virgil's shoulders. Virgil's heart leapt into his throat as he saw the dozens of tiny burn scars on Remus's arms. He squeaked and started to shrug Remus's sweater off. Remus didn't like people seeing them. He needed his sweater. Remus reached out and put a hand on Virgil's back to stop him. "It's okay," he said quietly. Remus needed his sweater. Virgil didn't. But he knew Remus wouldn't budge, so he had no choice. Besides, the weight of the sweater was helping bring him back down to earth. Virgil took a deep breath, shaky and nervous. He couldn't help but wonder if Diana was going to hate him. Remus gently patted his shoulder. The feeling gave Virgil something to focus on. He took deep breaths, trying to calm himself down. It was so hard to tell whether he was on the verge of a panic attack or a shutdown, but he didn't want either. Another pair of footsteps approached them. "Virgil, there you are," Diana's voice said. The footsteps stopped in front of him. "I brought your sweater. Here." Diana set something in front of him, and Virgil snatched it off the floor. He ran his hands along the stitching of the purple patches on the fabric. He wanted to say thank you, but the words wouldn't leave his mouth. He just hugged his sweater. He didn't want Diana to see him upset again. She probably thought Virgil was some pathetic kid. She probably hated him. He wouldn't blame her. Diana sat down on Virgil's other side. "Can you let me know when you can speak, kiddo?" she asked softly. "I want to know what's wrong, so I can help." Virgil buried his face in his sweater to block out the lights in the hallway. The familiar feeling of his sweater in his arms was comforting, and the weight of Remus's sweater and his hand on Virgil's back helped a little. He finally raised his head and turned to look at Remus. He was sitting with his free arm behind his back to hide his scars from Diana. Diana, however, hadn't seemed to notice. She was still sitting on the floor on the other side of Virgil, fiddling with the sleeves of her cardigan and waiting patiently for Virgil to feel well enough to speak. Virgil took one last deep breath and sat up straight so he could dig around in his sweater pockets. He found his phone and pulled it out. He went to his notes app and typed in what he wanted to say. He held it up so Diana could see the screen. "I'm sorry I got Gemma hurt. I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have gone to see the hostages." Diana stared at the screen. "Virgil, no," she whispered. "It wasn't your fault she was hurt. Mr. Chimera said that hostage was out of control. He could have killed any number of people. He was the one with the gun. You weren't. You were a victim in that situation. Gemma might have gotten hurt, and yeah, I'm sad about that, but she'll be okay. I'm just glad you weren't hurt too." Tears stung at Virgil's eyes. He was emotionally exhausted now, and he just wanted to go home. Diana reached out and wiped Virgil's tears. "You might feel like it was your fault, but it wasn't," she said. "Don't blame yourself for this, Virg. The only person at fault is the person who started the situation, and that wasn't you. Don't beat yourself up over it." Virgil swiped at his eyes. He still thought it was his fault, but now there was another reason he was crying. Diana's words sounded just like something Dad would say. Virgil inched closer to Diana, arms still wrapped around his sweater. Diana wrapped an arm around him and held him close. Virgil wasn't quite sure how long he sat there, taking deep breaths and trying to calm down. It could have been a minute or an hour. He couldn't tell. He chewed on his necklace, flapped his hands, rocked back and forth, anything that might help him feel better. Slowly but surely, it worked. He still found it hard to talk, but he managed to unfold from his curled-up seat on the floor. A yawn escaped his lips. "Tired?" Diana asked. "I guess a breakdown will do that to you." Virgil barked out a hoarse laugh with little humor. He nodded in agreement. "We should get back to Mr. Chimera's office." Diana pushed herself to her feet. "I think the others want to know we found you so they can stop worrying." She held out a hand. Virgil took it and Diana hoisted him to his feet. Remus tucked both of his arms behind his back and stood with them. The three of them started down the hallway, Diana with a hand on each of the kids' shoulders. Virgil hugged his sweater tightly as they walked. It was soft and familiar. Another wave of guilt washed over him. He'd interrupted Janus's work. This was a stupid thing to have a breakdown over. He shouldn't have made a scene like this. "Don't worry about it," Diana said quietly, as if she knew what Virgil was thinking. "I'm sure Mr. Chimera wouldn't mind. He and I were done with our business anyway. Maybe you can have a nap or something when we get back to his office. You look really tired, kiddo." Virgil nodded. He still didn't believe it when Diana said everything was fine, but it had been a stressful few days. Virgil deserved a nap. Remus flinched when he heard DW's voice enter Mr. Chimera's office. "Sorry that took so long, Jan. I was on call with Emil and he had to put me on hold for a bit while he talked to someone else." I believe that was my fault," Mr. Chimera's voice responded. "I needed advice from Dr. Bacani regarding the children. We have accidentally picked up another kid to take care of." Remus shrank down in his seat inside the blanket fort. Diana and Roman were in DW's office, reading together, and Virgil was asleep right next to Remus. He couldn't protect Remus if anything went wrong. He shook his head. There was nothing he needed protection from. DW was fine. She was good. She wasn't going to hurt anyone. "Yeah, I saw the mini Patton in my office. Why are we picking up all these kids? Did we start an orphanage or something?" "No, she's technically a legal adult," Mr. Chimera said. "She's the partner of the hostage who was shot yesterday, and she also happens to be Patton Hart's niece. Virgil and his brothers recognized her. She may be in danger, so I offered to let her stay with us, at the boys' insistence." DW let out a low whistle. "Damn. Guess we'll have to make sure the other guest room has clean sheets." "What was the issue Moggy and Teal needed help with?" Mr. Chimera asked. "A bounty hunter from Side Hill stopped by. He had a pretty interesting issue he thought we needed to know about." Remus tried to listen, but their voices became quieter, and he couldn't hear them. He cursed in his head. Usually when adults were talking like that, there was something they didn't want the kids to know. Patton spoke like that sometimes with Remy, and their old foster parents did that a lot. When Remus accidentally interrupted their foster parents, he was yelled at. He wasn't about to interrupt Mr. Chimera or DW either. He didn't want to risk it. "We can't go home right now," Mr. Chimera said, loud enough for Remus to hear. "We still have a lot of work to do, but this does make things a bit more urgent. And there's still the issue with Miss Short. She needs to pick up her things from her university and bring them to our house. I can take her to get her stuff from the dorms," DW offered. "I'll drive her home to get settled. I can bring Moggy and Teal with me for some extra backup." "That's not a bad idea. I'll stay with the boys. Virgil had a panic attack earlier because he thought it was his fault DW's girlfriend was shot, and I don't want him to wake up from his nap wondering where everyone went. I think it just took a while for yesterday's events to process." "All right, I'll stay at the house with the kid when we're done." DW's footsteps walked across the office. Remus automatically tensed when she yelled her next words. "Hey, Teal, we're on babysitting duty." Remus didn't like how her voice sounded when she yelled. She didn't sound angry, but he couldn't help but wonder how it would sound if she was. He almost felt dizzy with fear at the thought. He remembered what happened last time a grown-up was mad at him, and the memory made his blood run cold. He absolutely scratched at his arm. He could only hope that Mr. Chimera and DW wouldn't be the same as their last foster parents. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this series. If you like what you hear and you want to read more, you can find the link to the fic and the author in the description. If you want to check out other podfics I've done, you can click on the playlist linked on the screen. See you next time!